Good evening. My name is Kershaw McGowan. I'm the Deputy Police Monitor at the Office of Independent Police Monitor. And tonight we're live streaming with the consent decree federal monitors on the public forum about the consent decree and NOPD's compliance with the consent decree. So feel free to ask questions. We'll try to actually monitor this live to say those questions to the audience and get those answers for you. And if we can't, we definitely will follow up with some of you all and see what answers we can get to your questions. So I am now going to turn the camera around and they shall be starting soon.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. If you haven't gotten food, please do. It's delicious. I already ate it. I'm going to take some home. Please help yourselves. My name is David Douglas. I'm the Deputy Monitor for the Federal Consent Decree Monitoring Team. With me here tonight, Dr. Ashley Burns is a member of our team, who I owe an apology to because it is the afternoon meeting. I neglected to introduce her, but Ashley has been working with us in a number of capacities for years. Somewhere is Nikki. Nikki Snyder is also a member of our team who works with us. We have a sign-in sheet going around, so please sign the sign-in sheet. We take the names, and for our next meeting, so we'll make sure you get notice, so please sign the sign-in sheet. Some of you, this is your third meeting on this afternoon meeting, I talked a little bit about the consent decree. I'm going to, tonight, talk a little bit about what we have done in the first quarter, which I didn't get to this afternoon. But I know people have a number of questions, so I'm going to do that as an overview and then open it up for questions. And we have plenty of time to talk. What I'm going to ask is that people come to the mic to ask the question, because this is being live streamed, and people watching on the live stream can't really hear if you don't use the microphone. I think we'll have plenty of time, but I'll ask everybody to limit to one question or comment, maybe a follow-up. I don't have to be rigid about the rules, but if you have more, I'm sure we'll have time to come back around, and if it goes beyond the time we have, I'm happy to stay after. So I think we'll get to everybody's questions and comments. The afternoon meeting was really productive. We really got some helpful information to take back and consider, so I appreciate everyone coming here this evening. Just give me a second to look at my notes about what we did in the first quarter. So, first quarter, we really covered January through March. We started off the year, as we have in the last few years, spending 3 or 4 days here meeting with the NOPD and some of the city folks working on the consent decree and with the Department of Justice. And what we use that time to do is to go through each section of the consent decree, to talk about, what still needs to be done, what issues that have been resolved, and just to come up with sort of a plan for the next year for working toward compliance. Those meetings are very productive. We have exchanges. The superintendent and our leadership team attended virtually all of the meetings. So it was great. That was a great opportunity. We held a hearing in court. Many of you attended on the stop, search, and arrest section of the consent decree, and reported out the progress that the department had made complying with those, and we issued a report on that. Happy to discuss it more if there are questions about that. We reviewed the Public Integrity Bureau's case files, which we've done in the past to make sure the cases are processed appropriately. One of the things we looked at a lot are interpretation services. The consent decree has requirements to ensure that those who have limited English proficiency are served like other members of the community. And so we looked at that. One of the things that the department has done is gotten interpretation services. It's gotten, but while there's a high volume of calls, we're still seeing low usage of the services, and we're still kind of looking at that. We think that sometimes people just use a family member, or they have enough English to get through, but we're still trying to understand why there's relatively low usage. We don't know whether it means that needs are not being met or they're just being met in other ways. We did a review of the crisis intervention services. That really has been working well. It's one of the really great achievements of the department. They're required to have a certain number of CIT trained officers, but they've exceeded that number, and even those calls that are not handled by the CIT trained officers have been handled very well. And I should back up a step. Every officer gets some level of CIT training, and then sort of a level bumped up training. But what we really found is that the system has really upgraded how these cases are handled across the board. They really are handled very well. We looked at the handling of child abuse calls, and those were also handled well in compliance with the consent decree. We looked at, there were a few canine bites, out of policy canine bites. We looked at 2 of them. The NOPD looked at them, and so we reviewed what they did, the corrective actions they'd taken. One of them involved canine bit. They were looking for a subject. They narrowed it down to a shed. They did announce themselves. thought the subject was in the shed, allowed the dog to go in, and it turned out the owner was sleeping. The owner of the home was sleeping in the shed, and so he was bitten by the dog. So that was one. The other was, frankly, an odd one. A canine officer went to his son's school, I think it was his son, to pick him up, and the teacher opened the rear door to let the kid get inside, and the dog came out. And that obviously was out of policy, wrong, and NOPD has taken some corrective actions there to make sure that can't happen again. In the big picture, there are very few canine deployments and few bites, but those are two issues that we have looked at. We're continuing to look at some of the canine issues. And the last thing I want to touch on, we looked at Mardi Gras gun arrests. And I got a question from Tony. It was part of a question Tony asked in the earlier session, so if anyone sees Tony, I didn't get to answer that one. So as some or maybe all of you know, there were news reports about the Mardi Gras gun arrests. About 93% of the arrests in the French Quarter and St. Charles area were of African Americans, which is obviously disproportionate to the makeup of the people attending Mardi Gras. The question was about bias. So we looked at it, and we looked at it with NOPD. So what NOPD did is they looked at all of those arrests, and they audited them according to their existing stop, search, and arrest and procedural justice protocol. So at its basic, what they looked at was there lawful basis for the stop? Then we selected the officers with the highest number of stops, and we looked at the body-worn camera footage of their stops, and their gun stops. And then additionally, we also looked to see whether there seemed to be any indication that officers weren't reporting these stops. So we took the officers with the highest stops. We then looked at their field interview cards to see if they had stops that were not, that they didn't report the body camera on. What we found is that the stops were lawful. And you can see on some of the body-worn camera footage, you can hear an officer pointing out someone and saying something, for as an example, gun left front pocket. And they stop the person, and I think all of the instances, there was the gun. And it's because they could see the outline or they could see the person adjusting. So the stops, and in the main, they were polite. They said, excuse me, stop, I think you have a gun. They grabbed the person, they checked. If they didn't have a gun, which happened in a few instances, they let them go. Some of the people with guns had permits, but they treated them all appropriately. What we haven't been able to answer, however, is why it is such a high percentage of African Americans being stopped. In the St. Charles area, it makes a little more sense because of the high percentage of African Americans there, but obviously in the French Quarter, not the case. So we're still looking at that, actually. We did get some helpful questions and comments about the officers and who they were. So we're still looking at that. We're going to look at what they were told about their role and who there was. So while we can currently say that the individual stops were lawful and that the officers were respectful, we can't answer the question yet as to, and we may not be able to, as why it was such a high percentage of African Americans. They're a very serious cause, but we're going to look at it a little further and see if we can get more information on it. I think it was outside the quarter, but we talked about our bias-free presentation, so some folks heard that before, so I'm happy to talk about that. So I think that's a summary of what we did in that quarter. In this quarter, looking ahead, as I discussed earlier today, we continue to do our regular audits and checks on many of the sections of the consent decree. We are particularly focusing on the Public Integrity Bureau and how we handle some cases. And we've been looking at the PCABs, PCAPs have operated across the board unevenly. Some are working well, others not working so well. And so I know that the independent police monitor who has to introduce. So in the back, you all know there's Della Cement, there's Kershell here. So we appreciate you guys being here. So they're looking at some things I think you'll hear about. Some approaches to the PCAPs that we're also working with them on and reviewing. So at a very high, hopefully concise level, that's what we've been doing so far. But I'm happy to take questions on any topic that people would like to address. Yes, sir. If you could come to the mic so that people viewing can hear you.
And thanks for coming out. Thanks for your time. My name is Marvin Arnold. I'm an organizer with a group called Eye on Surveillance. We recently wrote a letter to Judge Morgan about the DA's use of predictive policing, which is legal under municipal law. We believe that this triggers paragraph 8 of the consent decree, which says that any city entity that does or is involved in policing operations basically is covered by the consent decree. We've CC'd your office and I have a copy here if you'd like. My question for you is if you believe that what the DA is doing with the DICE program triggers paragraph 8 of the consent decree.
The city as a whole is subject to the consent decree. I saw the letter, I saw the DA's response. As I understood it, he said that his office is a creature of the state. So to be honest with you, I don't know the legal ins and outs of it. I haven't had a chance to look. I just saw the letter. But I don't believe that the practice would violate the consent decree. I do want to look at it a little further, but he did give us a response, and we are aware of how they're using the predictive policing. So I don't want to take a position on it just yet. I'm happy to talk with you more about it. So it's something we're still looking at.
The original letter was sent 2 weeks ago, so I'm just wondering what the best way to actually carry the conversation forward would be.
Make sure I have your contact information or sign up.
I mean, you were CC'd on the email, I believe.
I did. I just say I read it. It was over. I just haven't had a chance to analyze the issues. I did see the letter, and we did get a response from the DA.
And we also followed up on that response with another response. So it feels a little bit like we've been trying to proactively include your office and not getting a response, but we will patiently wait. Thank you very much.
Okay, I will follow. I don't think I knew of your response to the response, but we'll take a look at it, and if you just make sure I get your number. Or it's on the emails. We'll follow up.
Yeah, I would just like also to call out that we've seen that the camera system has been disproportionately also used to target young black men for carrying firearms, and so you might want to look at that.
So
as another potential
we would definitely want to look at it. Yes,
Thank
we
you.
would definitely want to look at it.
Can y'all make sure when y'all talking, pick up the mic because they can't hear y'all back there the same. So you can pick it up off of the thing. Yeah.
Hear me now? In your report, you indicated that there were 2 areas that did not make it into the green. That's stop, searches, and arrests, and live street policing. And what is the problem with that? Why that did not make it into the green?
I think at the time of the report, we hadn't presented to the court. So I think both areas are in the green. The one issue, as I'm thinking about bias-free, maybe the language services that we're still looking at. So I actually thought stop, search, and arrest was in the green. What page of the report? Let me go back. I thought stop, search, and arrest was in the green.
That was in your overview in the last report.
In the Q1 report or
your last monitoring report.
Okay, I'll have to go back and check. I thought stop, search, and arrest was in the green.
Right.
Maybe Nikki can take a quick look and then I can get an answer before we.
Not according to your report.
Pardon?
Not according to
Yeah,
your
no,
report.
I'm just,
Right.
I just can't remember the language, so I'd have to look at it, but Nick is gonna check and maybe I'll give you an answer before we leave here.
And you indicated too in your report, use of force review board. Why is there such a backlog in the use of force? I think that throughout the consent decree, that's a primary area in use of force. And I don't understand why is there such a backlog?
So as I understand the backlog, it was attributable to the fact that you have to convene a captain's panel and it was hard to get people, they get called away and then they got a backlog. But what they did is they changed their approach and created a broader panel so it was more, so they were better able to hold them in a timely manner. In January and February, they worked to clear up the backlog, and I think they're close to having it cleared up with the new approach.
That's not in compliance though.
No, it's not. It's not. No, absolutely not.
And it's Dr. Matthew Ross, I believe he gave a presentation
Yes.
at the last court hearing with the judge. My question is, I didn't understand the damn thing that he was talking about in terms of his theory, in terms of how he assumed that there was no bias on police force. And I just don't get him at all, you know. And I can't say that I accept his rationale because his theory and concepts that he put on board didn't make a darn bit of sense. And I mean, you have to have something that the people could understand, you know, and relate to, the common person. And all that theory and all that, it just wasn't realistic, you know, how he came to the conclusion. I understand why he did that, because he's trying to justify the actions of the police department. And it sounded like to me that he was probably part of the MAGA team, you know, dealing with the Project 2025, you know, in terms of his mentality. But I think that needs to be revisited by you all, because that did not make any sense, and he's trying to okey-doke, well, the community, and maybe the police department too. So I mean, that was not a good presentation.
Well, I appreciate that feedback because it's important that people understand. I can assure you he's not part of the MAGA team. He's a very respected statistician in the area of policing practices. I'm happy to discuss the approach and methodology now if you'd like to, or separately. I'm also willing to go back. We could schedule a separate meeting where we review these things, because we've gotten a lot of questions about it, and I appreciate that. So it may make sense that we have a meeting where we walk folks through it. I don't want you to dominate it either, but let other people. I'm happy to come back.
Yeah,
Fred,
come
I'll
back.
come.
Right. I have a couple.
We've talked about this.
I'm sorry, even I can't hear you, Mr. Mullin.
Yeah, we've talked about this numerous times, and it's always been brought up. When you talk about
Won't y'all switch mics? And just get the mic back down so this mic won't be working.
when you talk about anti-bias policing, we sat in that courtroom and we heard about 3 hours of that.
I'm sorry, I'm still back.
In the courtroom, we sat and we heard almost 3 hours of anti-bias policing with a lot of stats being presented by Dr. Ross. At the same time, we're sitting in there and we're looking at Hans Gunther. If Dr. Ross is so respected, how come he didn't have any information on Hans Gunther and his involvement in the Beach Corner situation? That is going to be a recurring question that you, the monitors, the mayor, and Chief Kirkpatrick is going to have to deal with. This man is the second in command, but you come to our community and talk about anti-bias policing. No way we can accept that. What is your group going to do about that?
So I appreciate the feedback, and I'm aware of the history. as we discussed earlier today, I'm happy to discuss further. We can't tell the department, we don't make personnel decisions for the department, so we can't tell the superintendent who to appoint. I think the superintendent will be aware of the sentiment, and as you said, you've addressed it, I think, with her and the mayor. Part of the process, part of our role here, if you think back to when we came, our role was to get the department to get to a constitutional floor of constitutional policing and to give the community the tools to hold the department accountable. That doesn't mean that's the end of the process. That's not the ceiling, that's the floor. And so you have more transparency, more tools. So these are the kinds of issues that you should raise directly with the superintendent, perhaps with the mayor. With respect to Dr. Ross and his knowledge of the deputy chief, that wasn't really his role. He was really just there to study data. And I think what we can do is talk more broadly. We can schedule another meeting where we walk you through it. There are different components of examining bias, and as we talked about a little earlier, but I'll repeat for those who weren't there, our job is to monitor the NOPD's compliance with the specific requirements of the consent decree, and the consent decree is broken down into sections. One of those sections is bias-free, and we report on each of those sections. So the hearing that we had was just on the bias-free section of the consent decree, and that section, the paragraphs don't really deal with race, but the whole consent decree is really designed to deal with race and all of the things that you all know so well were going on here that harmed the black community. And so what our work has been about is about identifying those policies that didn't give appropriate guidance to officers, training that didn't teach them how to police constitutionally, the supervision that wasn't holding them accountable on the front line, the internal affairs or public integrity bureau that wasn't holding officers accountable for violating the rules. Those are all the things. And then we looked at, obviously, use of force and stop searches and arrests, and those are the audits we did. All of those things together attack the bias and the harms that were inflicted on the black community here. The bias-free section looks specifically at harms suffered by other groups, the LGBT community, the language, the LEP community. So as a whole, we're trying to address all of them. But the bias-free in the main is not the focus of that section of the consent decree is not race. It's covered, but the more specific requirements are on these other things. I will say the bias-free audit did look at race. We compared things like pointings and asking passengers in the context of a traffic stop to get out of the vehicle. We looked at those things by race and by gender. So it's a kind of a holistic approach to dealing with the uneven and unlawful treatment by the NOPD against members of this community.
Hi. Hopefully I don't need to stand up. Everybody can see me. My name is Gabe Bordnave. Sorry I'm late to the meeting, and I hope I didn't miss the answer to this question I'm about to ask. So, I watched some of these online. This is maybe the second one I've attended in person, and it's more of a general question. So, the way I hear how this conversation's going, like, I hear participants talking about like things that have happened in the past, like systemic racism within the police department. I want to get a better idea of how do you see the role of these meetings? Like, what do you want us to bring to you? Because you're the monitor, right? And I feel like your job is to monitor the police, and this is reporting back. So, like, how is this more than just lip service? I want to know, like, what do you want to get from us? How can this be more of an interactive conversation?
Oh, that's a great question. So there are two purposes to these meetings. One, we have these hearings in court, but we know that not everybody can attend and people can't ask questions, so we have the hearings in court, and we've always coupled them with public meetings like this so that people can ask questions. So we can explain to people what we're doing and giving people an opportunity to ask questions. And we take all that feedback and we deal with it and we report it to the judge. The other piece that we like the feedback. So let me give you an example. We had a discussion at the earlier meeting about the various data that is being reported, and people were pointing out that the data that we report is sometimes different than the data that the IPM reports, or different than the data that Jeff Asher reports. So we've been looking at our data, but in terms of the public understanding, which is what we're trying to achieve, I recognize, people are confused about this data, so we're going to go back and try and figure out whether we can sort of get some clarity and alignment on the data. Another example was we were asked questions when we did the Mardi Gras gun report about the officers, and I realized there's additional information people might want to know on that, so we're taking that back. One of the challenges is I often don't have answers to the questions in the moment that they're asked, but we take them back and we try to address them as best we can. So what we're looking for is feedback from the community concerning what we're saying about the consent decree. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're just to clarify. So you want feedback from us on what you tell us about the consent decree, or I guess the police department's adherence to it. Yes.
Yes.
So you want to hear stories from the community about times when they feel the police has not lived up to the aspects of the consent decree.
Yes.
Okay. All right. There.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Morgan Clevenger. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Stella and Treme Center and Chriselle. So I have a two-part situation here. So I am a president of a PCAB, and I want to talk about that a little later, but I want to go back to the bias discussion and the training from last night. I didn't get to go. I heard it was great. I didn't get to watch it. As a New Orleanian who grew up in the culture of New Orleans and has been a cultural and community advocate my whole life, one of the concerns that we have had over the years is how the NOPD, how the police interact with the community and the culture. And in my lifetime, I would say prior to maybe 1990, social aid and pleasure clubs, Indians, neighborhood marches, celebrations, no permit was required, no police fees were required to pay by the organization. When tourism took off in terms of this was our economy in New Orleans, became tourism, and our culture became part of that, and other people started coming to cultural events, then we saw the institution of requiring to have a paid permit, requiring to have paid police escorts, requiring the clubs and the organizations to pay a lot of money to practice their own culture. In the summer of 2000, well, I'll go back a little bit. In St. Joseph's Night 2005, Big Chief Tootie Montana, revered in this community, this city, who gave so much to this city. The Indians that night were harassed by the police. Nobody should ever forget this, ever, that in 2005, after 50 years of giving his life to the Indians and this culture, they were harassed by the police uptown. So a subsequent city council hearing, which was packed, Chief went up to speak, and he was so upset, and he raised his arm. I was standing right there. He raised his arm and he said, "This must stop," and he fell out. He died for his culture and for the freedom that it represents. So that police harassment stays with a lot of our people. They remember this, right? after Katrina, there was a big second line return, second line, and there was a shooting blocks and blocks away. And as someone who's been doing that for 30 years, we knew a lot of shootings the media took and said, shooting at the second line. We tried so hard to reverse that media bias. But one of the results of that was having a meeting. We went and had a meeting with Chief Riley at the time because they wanted to raise the permit fees and the police fees again, right? And what we asked for at that time was training from the officers, you know, that our NOPD officers would be trained on what the culture means and what it's about. I'm not sure that ever happened. I hope it did, but I would really appreciate if y'all as monitors could check on that and just see, is that really happening? Is our own police understanding and respecting our own culture and our own community? That's one piece. Sorry to go on so long. The other piece that we've been pushing for a long time is bias in police reports. As a person who's advocated and been on the scene for many people's arrests, particularly musicians and culture bearers, and domestic violence situations, and also as a victim of crime, what we have found is that when the police come to the scene, there is a report that's taken on the basis of who is speaking, right? They usually, especially with domestic violence, they separate the two. You have one officer talking to the man, another officer talking to the woman or the partner, right? And I have been on both sides of those conversations, and it's way different how they're being talked to and what the police, how they're moving that conversation. Now, when they get to actually writing that report, what really is difficult is that that officer, based on his own education, his personality, his upbringing, his own inherent subjective bias, whatever it is, that report is going to reflect that. And I can't tell you how many times we have seen inaccurate reports. And the worst part about that is that report becomes the basis for everything that happens afterwards. Meaning that when they go for the arraignment, when they go for the, every appearance in court, that testimony, that report becomes locked down. And if you've ever tried to correct a police report, or to change it, or to challenge it, it's impossible. They make it extremely difficult, especially for people who have no resources. So we pushed for using the body cam as more of an integral part of the report. So when we're talking about training that's coming up, please talk about that. Please get more in tune with how do we make these reports less subjective, and how do we take the victims and the possible arrestees, how do we take in those stories? How accurate is that? And where is the bias? Sorry to go on for so long, but I'll talk to you later about PCAB. Let me give somebody else.
You asked about training about the Mardi Gras Indians and second line. That actually did come up at the meeting, but the department now does training. They have one class called Cultural Gumbo, because officers who come to here to become police officers don't know about the unique traditions and history, and they have a course to address that. They actually presented on that in court. They have other courses on bias, implicit bias, so they have worked that into the curriculum, the training curriculum, and we've reviewed all those lesson plans and we've observed the training, so they've come a long way in that respect. Additionally, the meeting last night that the IPM convened was part of the process for the NOPD Academy to do a training needs assessment, and part of that is to get public feedback, and there was really good public feedback, both in terms of topics that should be taught and also who should teach them. And the curriculum director, Chief Johnson, he really seemed to take those to heart and ask questions and was really open to adding many of the courses they already do. As I said, implicit bias and some of the others. But he was receptive to adding some others and expanding who teaches the courses. So, and one of the observations about that is that's what the consent decree is trying to do. When we came, there was none of that. There was no opportunity for the public to have input or to really know how these courses were taught. But now there's much more transparency and opportunity for input. So the process is kind of working. Issues will change, teaching methods change, so that's why there's an annual training needs assessment to look at issues, and they look at things, including feedback from the public, but we look at things like when we do our audits, if we see problems with, one of the issues we saw was describing pat-downs versus searches incident to arrest. So they say, oh, that's an issue, they work that into the training. So there's this constant improvement cycle that they've been. That question was asked last night. I think the answer was they don't have the capacity, but I think they are open to it on a case-by-case basis. But as a general rule, not anyone can just attend. But you can see the list of courses. I think there's no reason they can't put the lesson plans online, frankly. I mean, it's all public information. And I think some departments do make arrangements for the public to attend training. I think it's a great idea. We've watched the training. We really think it's very good. Starting from being very bad when we got here. So that's the answer on training. Bias in police reports and domestic violence, that was a core issue in the consent decree. You're absolutely right. So what we do is we look at those incidents, we look at the body-worn camera, we look at the police reports. There's then enhanced training on how police should do it, and we have seen that they have been handling domestic violence cases very well. We don't have the issues of bias, we don't have the issues of believing typically it's the man over the woman. We don't do the dual arrests anymore. So there's been substantial improvement in that. We've reported on it, you can see our reports, but that was a big issue, and we worked on that, and we give them pretty good marks for how they now handle domestic violence cases.
So I guess the follow-up to that would be, how does all of this accountability go on after the consent decree monitoring process is over?
That's really my favorite topic, because I'm a big believer in building collaborative relationships. So I'll give you a little brief aside, commercial. Based on what I saw happening here in New Orleans and how consent decrees could bring the public and the police together around a set of shared standards. Several years ago, I wrote a paper called Consent Decrees as a Foundation for Collaborative Reform. And essentially what I observed there was consent decrees are just basically a big checklist of best practices policing. And if we could help the public understand what best practices policing would look like, it would empower them to engage directly with their police departments. And let's face it, the Department of Justice can't go everywhere there's a need. And frankly, if we can get the public and police to work together, it's a quicker, faster, cheaper way. So from that paper, I formed a nonprofit. It's called Effective Law Enforcement for All. And I've been really impressed with the response we've gotten. We've gotten calls from, we've worked in Orlando, Florida, and Montgomery County. I co-founded it with Dr. Burks. And then as a result of our work here and the vision we articulated, we've been invited to now become the monitors in Minneapolis. But it's not because I'm trying to be a consent decree monitor. That's not my gig. What my gig is, what my belief is, that we really can transform relationships between the police and the public and the police and the communities they serve if we bring them together around a set of shared standards. So what does that mean for New Orleans and going forward? Part of it, that's why the PCAB process is important. When we go, you need to have a structure for a continual dialogue and accountability with the police department. The NOPD now puts out lots of reports and data. It's a very transparent department. but you got to read them, you got to understand them, and I think the PCAPs could really be a place where they could come and report. It's great to have meetings, but as you all seen, we get different people at every meeting. So what you need is both continuity and structure. You need the same people to come who's heard the report this quarter and the report the prior quarter and become informed about it and can ask questions, and they can tell their friends and neighbors. So the vehicle for that under the consent decree are the PCAPs. That doesn't need to be the only one, it's just the only one we have authority. So it is my hope that as we transition out, because one day we'll be gone, won't be at least for 2 years. They gotta be found in compliance and stay in compliance for 2 years. During that 2 years, that's the opportunity to build that capacity to make all the PCAPs work. I know some work well. I think there's some additional things they can do, but they don't all work well. And so they all, for it to achieve its purposes, they have to work well across the city. I understand that the IPM and the NOPD or the city are looking at ways to make that better, and we're looking at that. So the short answer is, we are in part laying a foundation to empower all of you to play the oversight and accountability role that we're now playing when we're gone, and the IPM is going to be critical to that because she is going to take over essentially our role. So,
Morgan.
Questions about PCAP.
let's come back. We can come back. We can come back.
And I think some of that.
I saw you talking to Nikki, so you might have the answer on the on the green and is that what you wanted to talk about?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, wait a minute. Before we come back to you, then, if others have not yet had a chance to talk, I want to hear. Okay, back to you.
There's probably several reasons for the disconnect in terms of why the community is not involved, and it has a lot to do with you all. You know, you all have not been having meetings as you all supposed to have. And secondly, you do not have a liaison person that we could communicate with, you know, in terms of as outlined in the consent decree. And I stand to be corrected. I know Ashley has been doing a wonderful job, you know, and I communicate with her. But I don't understand. I mean, is that where's your assigned liaison person? I know Judith was liaison at one point. That was announced as being such, and we could go to her office and communicate with her on matters, you know. So that's one area, and that I'd like you to respond to.
Can I do that before you get your
Yeah,
next?
go ahead.
Okay. So yes, Judith has done it. Dr. Burns has helped us with it. Over the years, we've really developed a lot of direct relationships. I'm going to talk to you a bunch and others a bunch. But I think as we get into this phase of it, I think we'll be looking to restore that capacity. So I'm open to that. The thing is, and this has been a problem with other consent decrees. You get a local liaison who doesn't know enough, and it becomes a barrier. So I like the idea of owning it directly, but I think...
But I don't want to cut you off, but if you're going to substantial completion, I don't think it's mandated that you have community, you know, that you're coming in and have community meetings on a regular basis.
Oh, no.
That's what was required if you go to substantial completion. Is that required also in substantial completion?
Yeah, we'll still come and we'll have meetings and we'll report and update just as we have.
Okay. Another area, the status of the PIB remedial measures. What are remedial measures? I couldn't find that, you know. Are we supposed to know exactly what they are? I didn't get it from your report.
They're filed with the court, but so there was the show cause hearing on the NOPD's investigation of the mayor's executive protection detail. The court found that the city was not only not in compliance with the consent decree, but they had really intentionally not complied. And she held a show cause hearing. Before she issued an order, the superintendent proposed to her a series of remedial actions to remedy those deficiencies, and they report, I think it's monthly, on where they are on the process of doing that.
Do we have access to that?
I think they're on our website as well, but they're certainly on the court's website. Nick? They're on the courts.
Can she repeat that on mic so they can?
Yeah, Nikki, get a mic so that everybody can hear the answer.
Whoa.
You don't have to yell at us.
That was for you, David. So the reports are available. The court actually has a shortcut on the Eastern District of Louisiana homepage for the consent decree. So on the homepage for the court, on the left-hand side, you can actually, there's a hyperlink that says consent decree. You can click on that and you can see they have recordings of the public hearings. They have those status reports every month on that link. So it's a little bit more available, but we can link to it.
We're going to get it up.
Website.
We'll get it up on our website. That's
Yep.
a good suggestion.
I think we've been talking about this with the BCAPs and our community policing. In your report, you indicated that there were reports had not been submitted, and some reports may have not been submitted timely, as I understand what you're trying to say in your report. If this process is going to be successful, this is another, I would think, deficiency that exists in compliance with the consent decree. I think it's very important, and I think that is there some remedy to that? Have y'all identified how y'all going to resolve that particular issue? I didn't see it in your report.
It probably wasn't covered in the Q1 report, but it's an issue we're still looking at and working with the NOPD to get reports done. You're talking about the community engagement?
Community is under Section H, community policing, in your report.
In our report. So I think what that's referring to, maybe their quarterly or annual reports that are late. So
no timely reports, or no reports have been submitted, and the reports that were submitted were not submitted timely. That's all I section.
On community engagement,
Community policing.
Yeah, community policing reports. Let me take a look at it. That's
Okay.
another one I have to take a look at.
And I do have one more. Going on the rivalry, you know, I know some police officers who are retired, and I come in contact with them due to one of the jobs that I've held, and I guess this officer was very negative about the police department and about his job, and he indicated to me in terms of these going on arrival type things, that him and his partner, when they receive a call, they do not run to respond to it. They intentionally delay the response. And this is just one example that I heard from a retired police officer, and there's no relationship to me. So I just want to make that point. They said that they purposely don't respond to calls, and that I guess could explain some of the delays. Maybe the attitude is much more rampant in the department than what you may know or have been uncovered. And I think you need to look at that in terms of when that officer receives a call and respond, that they're going to respond to it. You need to look at the timeliness in terms of how long it takes, or if there's no response by any police officer to that call, that you need to find out why no officer picked up that particular call and responded to it. And I understand that they do that on a priority basis. It depends upon the severity or the seriousness of the call in terms of that. But I do recall last week that there was a murder-suicide in the city. And I believe the family waited maybe 2 or 3 hours. And I stand to be corrected on that, but that's what I understood happened. And I think they even called the fire department, and they had to call in to the police department and say it was an active shooter to get the police to respond. But it took them that long of a period to respond to a murder-suicide, domestic situation. I think that's appalling, you know. And I don't know if based on police attitudes or whether or not it's based on the fact that the police department is undermanned, and maybe it's all of those factors. but I don't think, I think y'all have some more work to do. You know, we hear incidents, you know, all the time. And I think y'all need to hang around for a while. You know?
We have looked at that issue. That is a serious issue. We've reported on it. The consent decree requires that everybody has access to police services on the same basis, regardless of not only race, religion, ethnicity, sexual preference, but in terms of geography. And so it can't be that you get a longer response because you live, for example, in East New Orleans, which has a greater geographic area. So we have looked at a lot on the issue of response times and gone on arrivals, particularly in areas of domestic violence. The department has taken some corrective action. For example, in the East, they've instituted what's called a power shift, an extra shift that overlaps to improve response times. We looked at the issue of deprioritizing calls from high priority calls to low priority calls to see whether that was sort of the explanation. Some of it is definitely manpower, but some of it is probably efficiency and response. We had observed that early on, so it is a serious issue. It's one in which the department's working on. They've made some progress. More progress needs to be made, but we are focused on that. For the reasons you pointed out, there have been some serious harms as a result of delayed response times. Yes, sir, in the back. Oh, I'm sorry. He had his hand up before, and then I'll come to you in the back.
In regards to prioritizing calls to what's more important to what's least important, could you give me an example of what's least important when someone calls the police for any type of crime or anything like that? Because what you was talking about in regards to the suicide, he had to wait so long, maybe hours, and which is unacceptable. But I know a lot of it could be manpower. Some departments could be short. You know, it could be budgeting, it could be whatever. But in regards to prioritizing, how would you say what's more important versus what's least important?
So, as some examples, a crime that's in progress, a crime that presents a risk of harm is the highest priority. But some calls are things, I'll just give you an example. My house was broken into, I was away, and it was 3 days ago. The person's not there. That's not as high a priority. Some are very low level. My bike was stolen. And I point that out because one of the things the department has done to help address this, they've created an alternative police response unit, and they're creating civilian investigators to go out and take some things just require a police report but don't really require a police response. So that frees up officers to go to calls that really need an armed officer response. Relatively new, they're still building it out. We think it'll have an impact, but the highest priority calls should be those where there's an imminent threat to life or crime in progress, and certainly the domestic violence calls would fall into that high priority and would expect the police to respond promptly.
But 2 or 3 hours?
Yeah, it's not good, right? It's not good. Not priority.
I could probably help with some of that. Part of the problem with the response is the communication system, and I challenged the prior director. He defended his CAD system, computer-aided dispatch. So you rely on the computer to assign a priority, rather than how it used to be. When the call taken to dispatch, it decided what the priority was going to be. We had people die in fires. I worked at a station where I knew the house where this lady died near the fairgrounds a couple of years ago. A year and a half ago, I think it was. 45 to 90-minute response to that address. It took 8 minutes to get there. Part of it was due to a station closure that I don't think was necessary. And the other part, the director tried to defend it, saying the system is doing the best it can do. It used to be done manually, and I challenged them, let's do it, let's do an experiment. Let's use your CAD system,
And let's find some of the retired dispatchers that used to do this stuff manually and see who can get the dispatch out and get the units on scene first. And he declined to accept that. He said, "No, computers are the thing of the future. We're not going to go back to an old system where somebody stand up on a map and do a dispatch." But I know for sure, because during the police Citizens Academy, we did a rotation through communications, and I'm watching the slow dispatch compared to on the fire side compared to what it used to be. So communications is not working. First of all, EMS took 45 minutes on the data and did me a parade to get an ambulance to Paris Avenue to a 90-year-old woman who had a heart attack. That's it. People dying in fires, people having police calls for domestic violence and taking hours. So part of the problem is could be NOPD. Some of the problem could be communications. But until we figure out what's going on with the two, I don't think nobody should get a pass. So that needs to be checked out. Before that, okay, you mentioned about having access to these reports. From what you were describing, you would almost have to be a legal eagle to go in and find these reports. I mean, I'm not that computer savvy. If we had a functioning PCAB, where part of the PCAB responsibility would be accessing reports and making them available to the public, because what you described about going to a website, being able to pick it off and knowing exactly what section to go to get a certain report, I probably couldn't do it. You know, Randolph would probably do it, but I could. I know I couldn't. But having that the type of interactions with the community, so that type of stuff is not hard to get. And again, I don't think we should get out of this consent decree until we know all those things are working.
I certainly agree.
To lean on. And on the police citizens, I advise every citizen who think they know the NOPD or think they understand it to go to the Citizens Academy and see for yourself firsthand how they function. It's different from what I thought it was. It changed my mind in some things. I know there's still a lot of work to do, but to build that relationship, you have to go and understand what they do and how they do it.
Sir, in the back, I think he was waiting. He's been waiting. No?
I think Morgan did.
Okay, PCABs.
Yeah, your PCAB.
PCAB.
President of which PCAB?
First District.
First District.
And we have Second District here, right? We have Third, y'all Third, right? Third District? Okay, so, speaking for our team and our motivation, we want this to work. And I have to stress over and over again that this is all volunteer. We have no resources. We're doing this on our own time and dime because we're committed to making this work and be effective. But as a longtime community organizer of many, many meetings, the public, the community, if they're going to give up their time, their family time, their work time, their free time to come to a meeting, they want to see progress and they want to see results. They want to feel like their time is they're being heard and that some progress is being made. So one of the big questions that continues to come up is how many of these recommendations that different PCABs have put forward over the years have actually resulted in something, in a policy change or some type of action?
Well, the short answer is not enough. I mean, I think the PCABs, I don't think, some of the PCABs work well. It sounds like you think even yours could have some improvements, and those are the things we're looking at. But the reports we're getting are that the PCABs aren't achieving their intended purpose, certainly not consistently and across the board, but they should be a vehicle for an exchange of information, for the community to make recommendations, for the police department to respond, and there should be a system for that. So we should be able to track what are the recommendations, and what has the department said about that? Yep.
Okay, well, I mean, one of the questions as PCAB boards as we continue to ask is, who are we answerable to? Because if we're making these recommendations, where do they go? They're supposed to go, we submit them to the NOPD. Where do they go after that? And, you know, what is the relationship? Are we answerable to the monitors and the judge, or the mayor's office, or the police department? Are we an independent board? I mean, some of the functionality of this is very challenging, and we hear different things from different people. So like I said, we're all volunteers. We are making the effort to bring community into this, but there needs to be more clarity. And also, I mean, I served on another first district before, and I attended meetings before, but I can't remember when the last time PCABs actually have met with monitors or with the judge. So we need to improve that communication.
I think that we agree. I know that Jonathan, the lead monitor, met with the PCABs. I wasn't at that meeting, so I know he did that. And this is something we've been focused on. This is something I know that the city and the independent police monitor are working on. So, and we're looking at it, but I don't want to get out ahead of their approach to it. But the questions you're asking are the questions we're all asking, and you've identified exactly the issues and the things that need to be happening. And I think hopefully before long you'll begin to see some proposals to address it and to fix it.
To be included in the planning. Nobody has come to us and said, hey, we need y'all to be part of these discussions and meetings that we keep hearing about are happening, but nobody's asking us.
I think you will be. I think it's in the early stages.
Yeah, I guess this is kind of piggybacking on what you were saying, Morgan. So you want the PCABs to do better. You want the city to listen to us more. And my question to you is, as the monitor, have you been suggesting ways to improve the relationship, the accountability of the police department to us, and the relationship between us and the city? Is that part of what you've been trying to do?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well, in any organization, business, corporation, public, or whatever, you have an organizational chart. You have a structure, a line of authority. So I think the issue that the lady right there was bringing up and the gentleman here was bringing up is the fact that there's no clear diagram, structure with positions and names. That's why there's no accountability. It's a failure. I mean, I have to call a spade a spade. You know, that particular PCAB, cut me off.
No, it goes in and out. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's going in and out.
Okay, the current, apparently the current structure that exists is not effective. And I think it needs to be thought out again and redesigned so that these representatives here, and designed in a way that these PCAB presidents can coordinate with one another too, you know, and coordinate it with somebody who's responsible in the police department or you know, with authority that could make changes that was just mentioned, you know, that the people come up with. And I think, you know, volunteer work, us on the community side, we expected to do a lot, you know, that we've been doing for decades here, and we've not gotten a dime, one penny from the you know, from all of the protesting and things. And I'm not looking for any money, but the bottom line is the fact that any changes come about, it does come from the grassroots community, and they make noise, and they hope that the government officials are listening. But sometimes it takes like 2 or 3 decades before we even got a daggone consent decree here, and we demand a consent decree way back in the 80s when they killed the folks in Algiers, you know, back in the early 80s. I mean, this has been going on and on, and it wasn't until Obama administration came in office that call had been answered, you know, in 2009, 2010, and then these folks show up, you know. So I mean, and if we don't get it straight, if you don't have anything in straight, you know, get it straight before you leave, that I'm gonna tell you, with the bad advice from other people coming in, from your idiot governor you know, from the Louisiana State Police that don't give a darn about following the laws and procedures, they don't really need to be in New Orleans. If they can't abide by constitutional policing, and this is something that we want you all to tell the judge and what have you, even though you may not have authority, but the authority comes, you just take the power and take the authority, you know. But that's setting a very poor example to the progress that I'm admitting to that you all had made on the police department. You know, you cannot make progress with one group and then you had criminal elements coming in and taking away the good progress. And I'm saying that you made some good progress that you all had made. I think the Louisiana set a terrible, bad example of what they're doing and want to do. You know, hurting citizens, doing chases around town, crashing cars. I mean, we don't want the NOPD to fall back in with that particular behavior. But if once you leave and once that federal oversight goes, they want to go back to the old cowboy days of just jumping out their car to the morgue, you know. And I think it's terrible. And I think, you know, y'all have made, like I said, I'm sounding repetitive. Y'all made some good progress, but as soon as you're gone, that stuff is going to go right down the hill because you have the forces in place to take it out.
So I think we have a shared responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. I agree with your criticisms of the PCABs and the lack of structure. I was going to try and see if Stella wanted to comment, but I think she had another constituency to respond to. So we'll come back. We'll have more discussions about PCABs, I promise, and that.
I just want to follow up on that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no problem.
Hey, thank you. Again, I do really appreciate you being out here listening to us. I just feel like you're not necessarily I feel like you're brushing over some issues and that the political will in the city, that the consent decree is going to end regardless. My question for you is, do we have, as individuals, is there a specific mechanism that we can take to disagree with any findings that your office takes? Are we limited to voicing our voice here? Can we make any kind of formal lawsuit? Is there a formal complaint process so that we can present our evidence in a more structured way and have it heard?
Well, you can contact the judge directly, as people have written letters.
Very low response rate.
I'm sorry.
Very low response rate that route. The judge does not reply very often. There's no legal requirement that she replies. So I'd like to know if there's any formal thing we can really do to get a response.
Well, we have definitely heard over these days that the demand for access. As I explained, that the judicial process is different than the political process about non-parties. I don't want to get too technical, but I think
I would appreciate technical.
I'm sorry.
I appreciate technical specificity.
Sure.
I'm sometimes not clear what we're talking about.
So judges, their role is to resolve disputes between parties, and this we're here as a settlement of a lawsuit. The Department of Justice was going to initiate a lawsuit. Prior to doing that, they entered into a consent decree with the city that has boundaries, but it's still part of litigation. It was presented to the judge, and she then did have a fairness hearing where I got a chance to weigh in, because part of what she had to decide was whether it was in the public's interest to approve the consent decree. But once you have that, generally a judge confines what she relies on to evidence presented in court. At the back end, I expect there will be some similar process for the public to weigh in before she makes a final determination. What we're working on now is to think about a process where people can share their views with her even before that time. So we're working on that, but it's not like going to city council. It's not an executive branch or legislative branch function. So it's just a little bit different, but I think there will be process.
So right now there is nothing beyond these meetings, to be clear.
Letters to the court. The judge reads all the letters. She refers them. We follow up. Sometimes there's not a response we can give, but it doesn't mean that we are not responding, just like the letters you just wrote. I have them, we're looking at them, I just don't have a response.
Do you happen to know if you did a formal injunction?
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Can you give them the mic, please?
So beyond that, from like a court perspective, like if I have a very specific disagreement with some part of your office's interpretation of the consent decree, is there a way for me to do an injunction or anything that's within the court's bounds that will force a response on an issue?
Well, I guess as a general legal matter, you could always seek to file something with a court, whether it meets the legal tests or not, I don't know, so I don't want to. I'm a pretty experienced lawyer. I don't think it's a practical matter that would work, but I don't want to. You want to file an injunction against me? I have a conflict of interest telling you that you can't file it.
Yeah, it's fun to ask.
So there's no real mechanism about it, and I don't think so. But you'd really have to.
And I think what he's saying is what a lot of people are feeling, that the consent decree may end prematurely. I mean, before we the public feel like it should end. And we don't feel like we're getting enough input. We're not allowed to speak in court. The NOPD present their presentations to the judge. And I feel like, I'm gonna say I feel like any decision she made is gonna be based solely on that and not so much on how we feel about being police. I mean, we employ the police department. It's our tax dollars that pay the police department. And us being left out of the process on how we feel we should be policed is just not fair. When this whole system 11 years ago came about to make the corrections, and we don't feel like the corrections have been made. And we know just the PCAP part, the part that we're gonna lean on to be heard in that 2-year probation period.
Yep. I don't disagree. I understand the issue. We've really heard it.
What recourse is if we don't feel like we're being treated fair?
Oh, but I do want to say this. I said it this afternoon. I want to say again. The way it works is even when the judge says there's a process in the consent decree that the city can come forward and say we believe we are in compliance. Even if the judge agrees, then we have 2 years. So it's not as if we're packing up and leaving soon. We are going to be here at least 2 years from, like even if she decided now, we'd be here 2 more years. Whenever it happens, we're then still 2 years. We'll be monitoring, we'll be meeting, we'll be taking feedback. So it's not like it's going to end and we're leaving soon. At the same time, we hear what you're saying about public input and the opportunity to have access to share your views, and we're working on it.
Okay.
I think this woman was next.
Oh yeah, let me just come back on the PCAP. Gary, it's all good. All right. Back to the PCAP. So I want to just say to you again, you mentioned the PCAP's some doing well and others not doing well. I think that it's important to recognize all the people, the community members who've been showing up
I agree.
and trying to do the work.
Yes.
Now, if there isn't a clear directional structure, accountability path, then again, we're giving it our all, but we need that reciprocity to empower us to be effective. Now, at our last meeting, we had a gentleman, Mr. Coleman from the NAACP, who was one of the, I believe, worked on the original consent decree, and he spoke and mentioned the fact that the original PCAP language contained language that empowers the PCAP to get access records, to affect policy change, to affect personnel decisions, and he said that language was taken out at some point. So I would ask of you tonight, sir, that to recognize that we want this to work and we're doing our all to make it work, and to say that some are not doing well, I think they just need more support and tools and resources and you know, actual response from your office, the judge. We need more communication, more interaction, and we need to be empowered to do the work.
We agree, and in fact, at the afternoon meeting, a woman spoke. She was the 8th district. She was saying she quit because nothing was happening.
I heard her,
so,
yes.
So it's not that, we're not saying the PCAB members aren't doing their part. We're agreeing the system doesn't support them enough to do what they need to do. And the only thing that I think you'll hear more from, the IPM is working, there's gonna be a plan. It's not our place or to come up with the plan, but the plan has to meet the requirements of the consent decree, and they have to be effective, so we're working closely. So I think you're gonna hear more. I know you're gonna hear more soon, but we completely agree with the criticisms that you've shared tonight and with the need for the kinds of solutions you're talking about. So,
and I would say
and you'll
that,
be part of, the PCAPs will.
Yeah, and that's my 3 asks tonight is that, one is we do want to know a number and what they are of what recommendations over the last 11 years have actually been implemented. And we do want to know when we could have a meeting with the monitors, whether it's all the PCAPs together or PCAPs separately or however, but these meetings need to happen. They haven't happened in a very long time, and I think that we would be more effective with the community if we had better support and knowledge from your office and the judge.
I agree, and we will meet. Let me suggest that after we break up, which I'm being told is go talk to the independent police monitor. I'm trying not to speak for her.
Yeah, but I'm talking to you.
but we the monitor, I will come back and we'll meet when there is a proposal out there to talk about it.
I just have one more question.
Sure. I'm going to make. Well, who else has a question? We got it.
Right
You
here.
have a question?
Yeah. I'll be quick.
You've had yours, but okay. Let's see how it goes. We have 3. Okay,
I'll be quick.
Okay.
I just want to know, has it ever been thought about the impact that it would have not only on the city, economically, crime, without the consent decree? Has that ever been thought about, the impact that it would have on the citizens, the economic impact on the city, and crime itself if we did not have the consent decree?
Yeah, so actually, one of the things we look at is litigation costs and the number of lawsuits, which are down. We look at the costs of.
The murder rate by police officers
went down, right? Right. Right. Absolutely.
I would love for us to keep it, but in regards that they have some people that's trying to get rid of it, let's look at the backside of it. I want to know if the backside is being looked at. Crime might raise. Economically, it may impact us, greatly, with things of that nature. So I just wanted to know if both sides are strongly being considered, having it versus not having it.
Mm-hmm.
Organized drug dealing, I'm going to be disrupted. But seriously, organized drug dealing has gone down because they're having police officers involved in organized drug distribution in the city of New Orleans, and that's a fact.
Randall, let me get to Arlinda has a comment.
Just a quick comment. I keep hearing everyone talk about the consent decree, and I just want to clarify what the consent decree can do and what it cannot do. The consent decree and the process that has happened already has been about putting systems in place, providing resources to the police department, and forcing the department and the city to look at things like PCABs and try to give the community some empowerment. The consent decree is the floor. It's a basic document that starts the process. Any reform that has happened in this country has been through the people. And the way we organize and move forward is you take a young intelligent man like this one who I know understands data, have him look at some of the transparent data that's being put out by the department and analyze it for you. We have to organize and find a structure behind how to continue and sustain reform. All the monitors do is monitor. You have an IPM that has been given through legislation the power to be your continuous monitoring once a federal monitor is gone. We have to make sure that that office has the support and the resources to do what they need to do, along with the PCABs, and organizing as a community and taking some of our young people that are talented in technology to start helping to pull some of that data in those reports. The thing that we had during the civil rights movement was people that understood that you can protest, but you also have to do things and organize and work. You have to go through legislation. You have to put laws in place. You have to keep this progress going. So let's look at this beginning of what we're going to be doing for the next century. We're going to continuously have to monitor the police department, continue to have an organized system through our community to continue the progress. That what the consent decree did was just a beginning. It's only phase one.
So you all, most of you all know Arlinda. I've said before, of anyone we partnered with to bring change to the department, it's been Arlinda for the NOPD. She was really the person from day one we relied on and worked with to help drive the changes that have occurred. So now she's free of working for the city, but she's still helping us build this progress. And as Mr. Batiste pointed out, she's now free. You used to pay for her because she worked for the city, but now we can use her free. She's a volunteer, but I hope she will continue to help us, and I hope you all will continue to turn to her and make her do it as a member of the community. That wasn't a quick answer, but it was a good one.
At the end, y'all gonna have to cut a check for Linda. Cause I changed my mind. I think she needs to be paid.
I worked 5 years with NOPD on data, and I was blocked along the way and made no progress. I worked within the system to pass a law that the DA is now breaking and that you are saying is permitted. It does not work to work within the system, even if you're a smart, young, whatever, good with data. That's not how things are structured, and this motivational speech is greasing over the reality that reform is not happening correctly in New Orleans, and it's not just going to get there with a few bright people. There are structural problems here that are not being listened to, and we're about to leave the consent decree with any tangible progress that we can actually hold on to.
And then I'm happy to chat, but I gotta close the meeting out. But I'm happy to stay around.
I'm just going to say one last thing before you go. Thank you, and I want to thank this lady, Miss Arlinda. Thank you for what you said, because we do have structural problems, but we do need a vehicle to make it happen. And organizing, empowering the community, making sure that it's results driven. That we see results, because the community will walk away if they don't see results. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. I promise. Pastor Scott, the last word.
Emphasizing what has just been indicated here by everyone is the fact that we believe, and I perceive you, we believe and perceive you that it is your responsibility. All of those matters are in the consent decree, PCAB as well as others. And it is your responsibility to make sure that everything is implemented in that consent decree before you leave out of here. And we're going to hold you to that. And I don't care about 2 years or 4 years or 5 years. I have to cut you off again.
No, it's not me.
Okay. It's the fact that, you all have the responsibility, your organization, and we're going to see to it that work with you all to see to it that every aspect of that consent decree have a check mark or go or however you want to call it. And don't think that y'all gonna get out of here
Okay.
as quickly as you think you're gonna get out of here.
All right. Hey, thank you everybody for coming. Please take some food, but make sure to leave me a thigh or a drumstick, so I'm going over there. But thank you all.